According to emerging reports, senior Pentagon officials have been quietly engaging with leadership from General Motors and Ford, including CEOs Mary Barra and Jim Farley. The message is not subtle. The U.S. may need its automakers to help build the tools of modern warfare. Now remember, the big three no longer include Stellantis. That's Ford, GM, and Tesla. And Tesla, which is Elon Musk, is already working with the military. Now this isn't speculation. It's direct response to a growing problem that Washington can no longer ignore. Ongoing conflicts abroad have exposed a reality that's uncomfortable but unavoidable. The United States does not currently have the industrial capacity to produce munitions, missiles, and advanced defense systems at the speed and scale modern warfare demands. Now, I'm not condoning war, but you do have to refill all that material that they've used and also be prepared in case something happens. And so stockpiles are being drained faster than they can be replenished. And the traditional defense contractors, well, their base is under pressure and they can't produce fast enough. So now the Pentagon is looking elsewhere, and this is where the car industry comes in. And when you need scale, speed, and manufacturing expertise, there's one place to go. That's Detroit. Let's be honest about what this really means. This is not a routine government outreach effort. This is Washington signaling that America's industrial base may need to shift priorities and fast. And the auto industry, which has spent the last decade being pushed toward electrification at an enormous cost, is now being evaluated for something entirely different: its ability to support national defense at a large scale. And that also means profits for those companies to offset the massive losses that they took for electric vehicles. Maybe this is a way to offset that. It'll help the economy. It'll also help car makers. There is a precedent for this. It's not ancient history. And during World War II, American automakers famously halted civilian vehicle production and became the backbone of military manufacturing. Tanks, aircrafts, jeeps, trucks, engines, all of it rolling out of facilities that once built cars for Main Street. It was called the arsenal of democracy, and it worked. The question now is whether history is about to repeat itself. Now, we're not talking about going to war, but we are talking about what they can do to work together. This is not through mandates, at least not yet, but through collaboration, which is Washington terms that often means something a lot closer to expectation than suggestion. And these discussions are still in the early stages, but don't mistake preliminary for unimportant. Pentagon officials are asking hard questions. Can automakers pivot their production lines quickly? Do they have the workforce flexibility? Can their supply chains handle defense-grade manufacturing? And perhaps, most importantly, what regulatory contractual barriers stand in the way? It's not a bad idea to be prepared. Now, this isn't a theoretical exercise. The Pentagon is actively exploring how commercial manufacturing can backstop traditional defense companies. And again, it helps them financially, which helps jobs, which helps the economy. And that alone tells you everything you need to know about where things stand. The existing system isn't enough. And companies like GE Aerospace and Oshkosh Defense Corporation are already part of the broader conversation, bridging the gap between commercial manufacturing and defense production. And Oshkosh Corporation in particular has long operated in both civilian and military spaces, producing tactical vehicles while maintaining a diversified portfolio. That kind of hybrid model may soon become more common if Washington gets its way. But this isn't just about national security. It's about economics. And that's where things get complicated. Automakers are navigating one of the most challenging environments in decades. Sales growth has cooled, profit margins have tightened, and like I said, the cost of electrification has ballooned, and they've taken losses beyond their early projections and putting enormous pressure on balance sheets. In other words, losses and job losses. And billions have been spent chasing EV targets that consumers have been slower to adopt to than expected. In other words, they're not really jumping on the EV bandwagon, and we've covered that before. In that context, defense contractors start to look less like a burden and more like an opportunity. Stable, long-term revenue backed by government funding has a certain appeal, especially when your core business is under strain. Again, car makers can make some profits, which they desperately need to make products that we want. Now, that doesn't mean this is an easy pivot. It's not. Building consumer vehicles and building military hardware are fundamentally different businesses. Defense manufacturing comes with layers of compliance, extensive testing requirements, and procurement cycles that can stretch for years. This isn't about slapping a different badge on a pickup truck and calling it a day. Factories would need to be retooled, workers would need to be retrained, entire supply chains would need to be adjusted to meet military specifications. A lot of that would be built right here in the USA, and that means jobs that would help our economy. And all of it would have to happen within a regulatory framework that is far more complex than anything the auto industry deals with today. Still, if there's one thing American manufacturers have proven, it's that they can adapt under pressure. During the COVID-19 pandemic, both GM and Ford shifted production to build ventilators in partnership with medical companies. It wasn't perfect, but it was fast, and it demonstrated something important. When pushed, this industry could move. Now, the Pentagon is betting that the same flexibility can be applied to defense production. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has been explicit about the need for what he calls a wartime footing in manufacturing readiness. That phrase matters. It doesn't necessarily mean the U.S. is entering a traditional war, but it does mean planning for sustained high-volume production for military equipment and replacing some of the older components as well. And the financial scale behind that planning is enormous. The Pentagon proposed a $1.5 trillion budget, would be the largest in modern history, with significant allocations for munitions, drones, and next-generation battlefield technologies. That kind of spending demands one thing above all else: capacity. And right now, capacity is the bottleneck, and that's where car manufacturers come in. There's also a strategic shift happening here that shouldn't be ignored. For years, the U.S. has relied on a relatively small group of defense contractors to supply military components. Those companies are highly capable, but concentration creates vulnerability. Expanding the industrial base to include commercial manufacturers could increase resilience and reduce dependency on a limited number of suppliers, and it also helps the car companies. That's the upside. The downside is just as real. What happens when civilian manufacturing capacity is redirected toward defense? What does that mean for vehicle production, pricing, and availability? And how does this reshape the long-term business model of companies that were already in the middle of a massive transition toward electrification, and now they're backtracking? These are not abstract questions. They're practical questions about real economic consequences. Timing is another factor that adds urgency to this conversation. These discussions reportedly began before the recent escalations in global tensions, but the current geopolitical environment has also intensified the pressure. The reality is simple. Military stockpiles are being depleted faster than they can be replaced, and the Pentagon is looking for solutions that can be implemented quickly. That's where car manufacturers come in. Some automakers are already positioned to step in on a larger role. General Motors, for example, operates a defense subsidiary that produces an infantry squad vehicle based on the Chevy Colorado platform. It's a relatively small part of the business today, but it serves as proof of concept. Automotive technology can be adapted for military use, and it can be done efficiently. So where does this go from here? In the near term, expect more discussions, more feasibility studies, more pressure from Washington. And the Pentagon is clearly signaling that it wants the industry to be ready, not just willing. And readiness is the key word. This is about preparation for a scenario where demand spikes and the current system can't keep up. In the longer term, this could fundamentally reshape how we think about American manufacturing. For decades, the auto industry has been driven by consumer demand, regulatory requirements, and technological innovation. Now, national security is entering the equation in a much more direct way. Detroit has always been a symbol of American industrial strength. Now, Washington is looking to it as something more, a potential force multiplier in a world where manufacturing capacity is becoming a strategic asset. Whether automakers fully embrace that role remains to be seen. There are financial incentives, but there are also risks. There's opportunity, but there's also complexity, and there's a bigger question hanging over all of it. When the government starts looking at your industry, not just as a business, but as a strategic resource, the rules change. One thing is certain. When the Pentagon starts making calls like this, it's not casual. It's a signal. The stakes are rising, the demands are increasing, and Americans' industrial base may be heading into a new era where building cars is only part of the job and part of the business. And this could help our economy, this could help jobs, and this could be a real difference. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe for more videos like this, and check out our car review channel, Car Smarts. You can support me by buying me a cup of coffee, and if you want even more content, check out the links in the description. I'm Lauren Fix. Thank you so much for watching.